So what on earth is Tequfah? The Dead Sea Scrolls are a significant tool for biblical studies as they pushed back the date by 1,000 years for the oldest known copies of many of the books found in the Bible. With recent translations of the last scroll fragments, scroll 4Q 324D has brought to the forefront the term Tequfah. A notation of Tequfah is found in 4 significant instances throughout this scroll. Out of all the scrolls found in Qumran, these scroll fragments are thus far the only ones where the word Tequfah has been found. Tequfah is the general term for circuit, the circuit of time, a cycle, and may be applied to the term of a day, month, year, etc., or even a period of pregnancy, as we see in 1 Samuel 1:20 with Hannah and her pregnancy. And it reads, "And it happened when the time had come around," that is Tequfah, "Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Samuel, saying, because I have asked him of Yahuwah." The interesting thing about this scroll was that before they could determine what was on it, the researchers first had to solve a puzzle, as the scroll was written in a cipher. Dr. Eshbal Ratson and Professor Jonathan Ben Dov of Haifa University, the Department of Bible Studies, stated in an article titled, "Israeli Researchers Decipher One of the Last 2 Undecoded Dead Sea Scrolls." And they state that it was not uncommon for documents to be written in code. This practice is also found in many places outside the land of Israel, where leaders write in secret code even when discussing universally known matters as a reflection of their status. They further explained that the custom was to show that the author was familiar with the code, while others were not. Researchers of this latest scroll say that it was the notations in the margins of the original text that helped them piece the fragments together. It appears that the original author had either forgotten or omitted some information that was added by a second author, which included dates celebrated by the group. The researchers noted that the sect used a calendar that was almost based on a solar year, in that it comprised of 364 days. Dr. Ratson adds, 364 divides into 7, so every date falls on a specific day of the week and every holiday has a fixed date. This scroll details all dates on which Shabbat falls and all the days of the week which holidays fall. The dates on this scroll agree with dates found on other scrolls like the Temple Scroll and the Sabbath Scroll. Dr. Ratson also explained that when significant events took place inside the temple, such as the high priest making a sacrifice on Yom Kippur, only one calendar could be used. Quote, "But this calendar was disputed, which may be one of the reasons this sect left the temple and went to the desert. They had many disputes, and this was one of them. They couldn't celebrate holidays together." History tells us that the separation from the temple happened during the time of the Hasmonean revolt. And history also tells us the effect this calendar dispute had on the high priests. As the lawful Zadokite priests were ousted from the temple, they took the priestly calendar with them, leaving behind the new woke Hellenized priests with their new woke lunar calendar. Well, actually, it wasn't a new calendar. It came from Babylon. But they brought it to the temple. Now, the ascension of Antiochus IV, Epiphanes to the Seleucid throne in 175 BC, marked the beginning of the end of the true high priest. Onias III, a descendant of Zadok, served as Cohen Gadol, as high priest at the time. A victim of slanderous accusations, Onias was deposed and replaced by his Hellenized brother Jason, who promised Antiochus higher tax revenues from the Hebrews. A few years later, Menelaus, a non-Cohen, a non-priest from the tribe of Benjamin, promised Antiochus a larger sum for the position of Cohen Gadol. His wish was granted with the assistance of the Seleucid army. Thus began the practice of buying the high priesthood from the government. This explains the extremely high number of high priests during this era, since most died when they entered the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The Gemara states that during the first temple, only 18 high priests served in it. But after the false priests and their false lunar calendar took over the second temple, the high priests started dying on the Day of Atonement as they entered the Holy of Holies. They were in essence offering up strange fire to Eloah, and their fate was that of Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron. In other words, they came before Yahweh at a time not appointed by him. A small bit of math, along with recorded history, reveals a startling fact. From an article in the Jewish press, we read, quote, in the second Mikdash, or the second temple, which abided for 420 years, more than 300 high priests served. If you take off therefrom the 40 years which Simeon the righteous served, the 80 years which Yochanan the high priest served, the 10 years which Ishmael ben Fabi served, or as some say, the 11 years of Rabbi Eliezer ben Charsam, and then count the number of high priests from then on, you will find that none of them completed his year in office. They all died when they entered the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. Unquote. The people were so accustomed to seeing the priests die that they tied a rope around them, and when they didn't walk out from the Holy of Holies, the people knew they had died, and they were pulled out, for no one else was allowed to enter into the Holy of Holies. This is why it is so important to number our days correctly. Remember what David said in Psalms 90:11, who knows the power of your anger and how to count out his days because of the fear of your rage. We certainly don't want to end up like Nadab and Abihu. Going back then to this word takufa, post-biblically, that is in modern Hebrew, it commonly means equinox. And yet, Tequfah never has this meaning in the Tanakh. In biblical Hebrew, Tequfah retains its literal meaning of circuit, from the root meaning to go around. The author of the scroll appears to note the first day of the months 1, 4, 7, and 10 as Tequfah. So let's take a look at the 4 excerpts from the scroll 4Q324D where the word Tequfah is used starting with the first month. And we read, the beginning of the first month on weekday 4. So right there it's telling us that the year began on day 4 of the week, and it is Tequfah. On the 4th, in it, Sabbath. So the 4th day of that month was the Sabbath. On the 11th of it, the Sabbath, again on the 11th day of the first month. On the 14th in it, Passover, weekday 3. So we see that on the 4th day of the week, which is the first day of the month, of month 1, and Tequfah is indicated as the beginning of a new cycle. According to the book of Enoch, it is on the 364th day of the priestly count where we will find the final end of the quarter leader, or what Enoch refers to as an intercalary day. Now it is the end of a quarter leader because Enoch tells us to count a quarter by counting 3 months as 30, 30, 30, and 1 days. So the last month of the quarter had 31 days. This indicates that the 1 is at the end of the quarter. Had he said that the quarter was counted 1 and 90 days, we could then argue that this leader led in the quarter as the head instead of a tail. Now with this in mind, we will, for the rest of this study, refer to the 91st day of each quarter as the end of quarter leaders. Okay, so the end of quarter leaders are the intercalary days, or the 91st day of each quarter, because it marks the end of the quarter. The 91st day marks the end of the quarter. Okay, so they're end of quarter leaders. Now Enoch gives us instructions on dividing the year by quarters and again with seasons. Many people confuse these two leaders as being one and the same. However, if we looked at only the first month in this scroll, there could be an argument for Tequfah to mean equinox, as the equinox was used by the priests to start the new year, or a new Tequfah circuit. But we can also see that the last quarter ended the day prior, then also lending to the argument that Tequfah could simply mean the start of a new quarter cycle as indicated. So then let's look at the next instance where Tequfah is used in the scroll to see if it sheds light on the application of this word. And it reads, weekday 2, in it falls the 30th day of the month. Weekday 3 is additional. The beginning of the 4th month is on weekday 4, Tequfah. On the 4th in it, Sabbath. We see again that the first month of the next circuit, in this case month 4 of the year, begins on the 4th day of the week and is called Tequfah. This first day of the 4th month is just 1 day before the sun event of the summer solstice. So if we're counting out days as prescribed by Enoch, this Tequfah lands 1 day prior to the sun event of the summer solstice, during a time when the sun appears to stand still. Thus again, I guess could be an argument for Tequfah as a seasonal turn distinction. But on the other side of the argument, it is the actual day of the new quarter as well. So this first day of the 4th month is the actual day of the new quarter, where the next day is the seasonal turn. They're not on the same day. So whether you want to kind of fudge it and say, well, the sun's standing still at that time, so this could mean the solstice, because, you know, the sun is standing still. We see it 3 or 4 days before we start really seeing it start moving significantly more as it comes around. But also notice that the scroll is also telling us that just prior to the first day of the 4th month, the 30th day of the month falls on the 2nd day of the week, and that on the 3rd day of the week is the additional day. They don't call it Tequfah, they call it the additional day. The day that Enoch tells us is the last day of the quarter, the 91st day. So Tequfah then is indicating the start of a new quarter circuit. And we continue on with the scroll. The next instance says week 2 in it falls the 30th day of the month. The beginning of the 7th month is on weekday 4, Tequfah. The 7th month, being the first month of its quarter, begins on day 4 of the week, like all the heads of the quarters. Typically now, the autumnal equinox falls 5 days after the day called Tequfah in the scroll. Thus, it's hard to argue here that the ancients believed that the autumnal equinox happened 4 days prior to the obvious straight line shadow of the sun. Now, I surmise that our ancient forefathers and even the ancient common folk knew the heavens much better than us common folk do today. They knew the solar signs of the seasonal changes. The sun's trek from north to south and back again is easy enough to track for even a lowly shepherd boy in the field with only his staff in hand. Then giving in to this argument that Tequfah's application in this scroll was to indicate the beginning of a new quarter cycle and not the start of the autumn season, which is witnessed in the heavens by the sun's due east rising event. Finally, the 4th quarter we read, weekday 2 in it falls the 30th day of the month. Weekday 3 is additional on the 1st day of the 10th month, Tequfah, on weekday 4, on the 4th in it, the Sabbath. So the Sabbath was on the 4th day of the 10th month. Again, we can clearly see that the physical solar event of the winter solstice happens 4 days after the indicated Tequfah on the 1st day of the 10th month. The application of the word Tequfah would then seem to be the author's indication that a new quarter cycle had begun. To claim that Tequfah literally means equinox and or solstice rather than just a completed circuit of 13 weeks, because it now has this understanding in modern Hebrew, is an anachronism, meaning that we must keep terms within textual understanding for the time period. It would be like saying that there were handguns in ancient Israel because the word ekdak, meaning a fiery glow, which appears in Isaiah 54:12, is the post-biblical or modern Hebrew word for handgun. We know that they didn't have literal handguns in biblical times. It just meant a fiery glow, but today it means handgun. The same with this Tequfah. We must keep words within their textual time period. This scroll is certainly a witness to Enoch's breakdown of the yearly circuits and supports what other scrolls have already brought forth and how this priestly Zadokite sect kept our Creator's division of time as given to Enoch, Noah, David, Solomon, and Moses. Now, the most interesting thing I find with this Tequfah application is that they also mark the memorials of Noah in the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th months. Thus, perhaps, their only designation. We cannot know for sure, but we do know that the Book of Jubilees was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. So let's go to Jubilee 6, starting with verse 23. And on the 1st day of the 1st month, and on the first day of the 4th month, and on the first day of the 7th month, and on the first day of the 10th month, are the days of remembrance, and the days of the Moedim in the 4 divisions of the year. These are written and ordained as a testimony forever, and Noah ordained them for himself as feasts for generations forever, so that they may have become thereby a memorial unto him. And thus they are ordained, and placed them on the heavenly tablets. Each had 13 weeks, from one to another their memorial. From the first to the second, from the second to the third, and from the third to the 4th. And all the days of the commandment will be 52 weeks of days. 52 weeks will be all the days, and these will make the entire year complete. Thus it is engraven and ordained on the heavenly tablets, and there is no neglecting this commandment for a single year or from year to year. And command thou that the children of Israel, that they observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days. And these will constitute a complete year, and they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts. For everything will fall out in them according to their testimony, and they will not leave out any day nor disturb any feasts. So he's telling us, when we follow this manner of computating our days, the feast days never fall out of place. We use the counting method of the priestly order of 364 days. So with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, many calendrical questions have been answered as to how the early priests of the first temple kept track of days, affirming that our Creator's days are fixed indeed. These dates are all counted and confirmed by solar reckoning. So this brings us to the conclusion of our study, and until we meet again, I'm going to wish you Shalom. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.